Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Create Your Life series, where we help you maximize your potential and results in the area of personal development, entrepreneurship, and travel. And I'm your host, Kevin Y. Brown.
Create your life.
Crée ta propre vie.
Create your life.
创造你的生活。
Create your life.
Crea la tua vita.
Create your life.
Ontdek jouw leven.
You better create your life.
Create your life.
Create la vie.
Create your life.
Create your life.
Beautiful people, this is the Create Your Life series. I'm your host, Kevin Y. Brown, and it is an amazing day. Actually, we have an amazing guest in the studio here today. This gentleman is an HBCU grad, which I'm super excited and happy to, have a little bit of that conversation about. But he's an ad tech professional from Jamaica, New York. He's a startup aficionado. Watch out now. Technologist, entrepreneur, and all-in-all gentleman. All-around gentleman. I actually know him, so I could definitely attest to that. He has worked with top companies such as Indeed, Inc., as well as the largest advertising agencies on the planet. Working with NewME Accelerator, he has developed and helped to consult incredible minority entrepreneurs that have raised millions of dollars and also consulted small businesses as they enter the digital age. I'm talking about none other than Mr. Thomas Teel. Thomas, please say hello to the Create Your Life family.
Hello, Create Your Life family. Really, really happy to be here.
Okay, cool, man. Thomas, just jumping right in. You're from Jamaica, Queens, Southside Jamaica, Queens. I feel like that's a neighborhood, not being from New York. You know what I mean? I feel like 50 Cent is made super, super popular. Like everybody knows about Southside Jamaica, Queens now. I'm sure they did before. I just wasn't knowing. So that being said, you were raised with your mom and your dad in the house, as well as your two grandparents, your grandfather and your grandmother. Man, how did that experience shape you, especially being in such a rough neighborhood, drug infested, growing up at the time that you did?
Yeah, so definitely had a village in my house, right? So grandma, grandpa, great grandma at the time, little brother, mother, father. All in the house at the same time in a neighborhood that, notoriously the media is going to give it to you as, really drug infested and a really terrible place to grow up. But like I always tell my friends, when you're so close to it, you don't even necessarily know that you're in this really, really bad area, right? So the story really is, Jamaica, New York wasn't really the worst place on earth, right? It was a really, really place where folks would move to once they kind of met some sort of success. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of other places, like Oakland, like a lot of other places in the country, once the crack epidemic hit, mm-hmm. things got really, really rough. So I don't really like to glorify the negativity that happened. I kind of look at it as just kind of a change in what was going on, and I'm thankful for it because it allowed me to be a little bit tougher than a lot of people, right? As I mm-hmm. kind of move through industry and learn. I mean, I'm really, really comfortable shaking the CEO's hand just because, I've met much tougher guys in the streets. So right. That's kind of how that shaped me.
That's a great perspective. I like that you touched on that. So who would you say were some of the biggest influences on making sure that you stayed on the straight and narrow? You know what I mean? Even though you met tougher guys, you chose not to become one. So who were some of the people that really helped shape you? To make sure that you did that.
Oh, sorry to cut you off, but my uncles were super tough guys. So,
okay.
So no one's going to mess with me because my uncles will probably do something too, that I don't want to talk about on your show. But that and, from the positive place, my coaches played basketball growing up here in New York City, one of the top kind of high school players, top 200 in the city at the time. No one really wanted, the standouts to get into trouble, so I kind of mm-hmm. was able to steer clear of that, and my family are all educators, so very important for me to maintain my education. Have a really, really high GPA, really be a student athlete further than just like the kid with the crossover. And that kind of shaped me pretty well.
Create Your Life family. I could attest to the crossover. I definitely seen this guy in action when we were at Clark, and he hit a few cats. It's his hesitation. It's not pretty. You don't want to be on the other end of that. I
still got it. Don't let this new shape fool you.
I love it. So that being said, you know your coaches, your grandfather, the family, they helped to shape you, make sure that you were raised in this loving and caring village. Man, how'd you get your inspiration to end up and go to a HBCU, man?
Man, that's a funny story, and it's actually a pretty terrible story from, getting back to South Jamaica. I went to high school, August Martin High School in South Jamaica, and I only applied to one college.
Okay.
My friend Darnell, he was down at Clark, and he was playing basketball. We played AAU together, and I'm like, if this kid can make the team, I'm just going to go down to Clark and make the team. And, I knew my grades were really, really high to the point where, the focus for my coaches were to go Ivy League. And we'll talk about it. Thankfully, I didn't do that. I'm really, really happy I went to an HBCU. But, I knew I'd get accepted, had really high grades and high SAT, and I just went down to Clark and tried something new. With my family being all educators, it was a kind of natural transition to go to college anyway. And it was really it was very unlikely for me not to get accepted to Clark.
Right. And you said something to me earlier that I thought was pretty cool. You said your grandmother has her master's.
Yeah, my grandmother has a master's. My grandfather has his degree from St. John's University. So, I don't have the story of first generation educated when my younger brother is pursuing his PhD as we speak. So, I come from a very educated family. My aunt helped to create the Montessori program. So I come from a family of pretty intelligent people
and go-getters at that.
Yeah, go-getters.
You said your grandfather was the principal.
Yeah.
At a school that you attended.
Yeah, I went to Louis Armstrong Elementary School in Corona, New York.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people know my grandfather in the neighborhood and really respected him in Queens. As a matter of fact, I went to Elmcor, which is a kind of recreational center in Queens yesterday. My grandfather's in the Hall of Fame there.
Oh wow!
For just being like an enforcer in the community, further than just being a gentleman, which is why I like to tout that I am a gentleman. That's how I was raised. He was a tough guy, military guy, and everyone respected that. He started out as kind of like low on the totem pole, right, in the school, and was respected well enough to, while I was there, be the assistant principal and promoted to the principal. And he decided to retire once my brother and I were finished with our elementary school. So, really, 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 really stand-up guy. And it's kind of where I got a lot of my focus from in understanding of, making things work.
You got me torn between two things right now.
It's
because
tough,
I want to
right?
ask you, how important do you feel the HBCU experience was in shaping you? But then I want to switch back and I want to highlight the fact that you built your first computer when you were 10 years old.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that that's so important because that's a level of access that, you only really see, or that's not necessarily talked about.
Right.
And in the book Outliers, they talk about that with like a Bill Gates, you know what I mean? And these different people who seem to stand out and do great in their fields or who have done great in their fields. But there was this early level of accessibility that others didn't have. So you said that you've seen 11-inch floppy disk.
11 and a half, yeah.
11.5-inch floppy disk, right. So how did you get access to computers and things like that at a time where I know those things were so expensive? Expensive
and scarce. So my grandfather's actually one of those guys that didn't spend any money. He was so focused on us, right? Making sure that my brother Chris and I, his daughters, his sons had the access that we have today, right? So he would just go to work, come home, eat dinner, do it all over again, and make sure that we had access to the things we needed. So I was never really one of those kids that kind of wanted for anything. I will tell you this, I wasn't given anything either. But it wasn't, not a spoiled thing at all, but more of a, hey, whatever is necessary to make sure that you're successful, we'll figure out a way to make it happen. But as far as the computers are concerned, luckily, being an educator, curriculum changes, and technology changes. So I had the opportunity to, start working with computers. As soon as kindergarten hit, I was on the Apple IIe using that new mouse and that new computer and using those 5 1/4 floppies and playing I can't think of the games right now, but I mean,
Oregon Trail
at 5 years old. I had that access, and I mean, it kept on going from there to the point where, I mean, my grandfather had me learning BASIC before I was even maybe like 10 years old. Really, really basic commands. I'm not going to tell you that I wrote a program when I was 10.
Right.
But, I mean, that's the kind of focus that he had. It was a lot of foresight to know that that's kind of would be where we are today. And thankfully, that's kind of where my career is based on that early access that you kind of mentioned.
Yeah, I'm happy that you have this person to highlight, your grandfather.
Definitely.
Sounds like an amazing guy. That I'm sure you had a lot to do with your HBCU, you selecting and going down to Clark, and definitely, carrying on his legacy. What do you think about the HBCU experience? How important or relevant do you think it is today?
Well, I can talk about me, and I think it was perfect for me. I think that, going to high school and where I went to high school, I go to speak at the high school when I have the opportunity to. And right now we have a graduation rate of about 33% of the senior class within 4 years. And I think it's slightly higher within 6. So it's a really, really tough place to be for those students. And I think that going into an HBCU for me was the perfect way for me to not fail out of school, right? So I was very comfortable. I was very, happy to have great friends and meet people that I was similar to. And it provided a comfort level that I may not have had if I would have decided to go to a PWI. It was a level of community, a level of family that I was very used to growing up in the neighborhood, and having that extension once I got to Atlanta was very important for me in hindsight. When you're there, you don't really cherish the amount of community or the level of community that's there, but I think that's the important part of that HBCU. I think that the professor that will fail you is the important part of being an HBCU because they actually care. They don't want to see you go out into the marketplace and be not succeed.
Dope. I want to let you know, Create Your Life family, that we have people tuning in on Facebook Live, and they are active. And I want to give a shout out to Estelle Lett, who is actually listening from Paris, France right now.
Wow.
And she literally, I typed, like, oh, where are you at? Like, where are you located? And she's like, I'm in Paris. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So shout out to Estelle Lett, Leroy Barr, who's saying, keep up the great work. Talking to you.
Thank you,
Thomas. We have Dave Mack.
My guy.
Yeah, who is definitely tuned in. And everybody else, Ruth Ann White, who is, on Facebook Live and going in. And I want to remind y'all can also call in and talk to Thomas. We're just, touching the tip of the iceberg.
Definitely.
But the number here is 212-650-6903. Call and be a part of the show. Don't just listen, be a part of it. So Thomas, you talked about, how important the HBCU experience was for you. I can honestly say for me that the HBCU experience is one that kind of shaped me. It completely changed the trajectory of my life. I went in a particular way, and I would probably say I'm like a 1080 from when I first got there. Create Your Life family, when I went to college, I had gold teeth. I only wore Jordans and Air Maxes and like all these big clothes, and was just really like, pretty much like it's whatever. But through understanding and seeing other excellence, through people who look like me and having professors who cared. I remember getting a C in English my first semester, and for the life of me, I just couldn't understand it.
Like, I speak the language. How can you do that?
Like, it's wild. But it taught me an important lesson, and I remember being in a speech class and the teacher giving me a B, and giving this other guy an A. And I was like, how did I not get an A? It's speech class. And she said, because you didn't grow during the course of the class. It was Professor Edie, matter of fact.
Major. I remember Edie.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
But, it's those things where it's like, what? He came, this far, and grew this much during the course. And, you didn't. You rested on your laurels and just essentially depended upon your talent and didn't put forth the effort.
Right.
And it was those small lessons that you get over and over and over again at the HBCU, at Clark Atlanta for us.
Right.
That helped to shape who I am now, to even be able to be here, to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely.
And so it's definitely an experience that I think is valuable.
I'll even add to that. My experience was to find out that I wasn't the only smart black kid in the world, right? So for me to leave August Martin High School with, probably the top SAT score in the class, one of the rare male graduates in the class, my friend Saeed, he's, we're still great friends to this day, doing really, really well, and I'm the hot stuff. And then I come down to Clark and I meet these guys that are ready to be engineers and, just they got it going on.
Right.
And I'm nobody once I get there. So that was a shock for me, and it was a way to sit me down and get off my, as I read in the Clark Atlanta kind of mailer to alumni, get off my overprivileged high horse and understand that, we got to work. You're not the cream of the crop.
Right. And it also breeds a level of, just because you are doesn't mean that I'm not.
Right.
So there's that, that opportunity to become of excellence or rise to a different level of occasion, right? And then you start to see people. Like for me, what was really eye-opening, like my roommate was from Cleveland. I never met anybody from Cleveland. So the questions that I had were so naive or narrow-minded, but you get the opportunity to explore. Like I never met anybody. I think we were talking about this before. I never met anybody from New York. So just the difference in our cultures is just like, what is happening, right? And then you meet teammates. Remember Kobe, he's 7 feet. He's from Ghana. Never met anybody from Ghana. You got other people from France.
About Kobe, wow.
Right, so you have all of these people from all these different places, and it's like, whoa, man, this is a whirlwind of experiences, but all of these people from all these different places look like you. Because a lot of times it's like scratching your head, like, okay, well, when you think of France, you don't think that anybody, you know what I mean, at that time, you know what I mean, you didn't necessarily see a lot of people of color in the movies and things like that. So, which also lends to your network at this point, right? So I know as we travel across the country and beyond, we can land almost anywhere and say, hey, who's here? And, have a place to stay and a good meal and understand the landscape and have a way better opportunity or feeling when I land in these different cities. That and also being able to have a deeper than surface conversation. Definitely. Being able to really say, hey, you know what? Tell me a little bit more about this. You know what I mean? There was civil war in this particular part. I watched this movie. How do we have that? One big thing that happened for me is that I have randomly watched this documentary about India. And so, they used to have the caste system there. And so there's a group of people there called the untouchables, right? Where they're from a particular part of the country and it's like people won't touch them. Wow. Right? And so I ran into one of my friends, Ian, and he and I were having a conversation. And so, I brought it up to get more context and just to be more, to understand more about the culture and stuff. So being able to have that as that reference point, because at this point, curiosity is my thing. Definitely. So I just want to know more about this. I want to ask this particular question to people who have these different walks of life. But being able to have that conversation from a non-offensive standpoint is family. Huge. Right. Yeah, with family. Right. Exactly. Is huge. And man, I just have to say that, thank you, Clark Atlanta, for that, because, having went and studied abroad and being able to meet people like yourself and like these other people who we run into, we get to understand what excellence is of people that look like us and what excellence is of the world. Right. So no, absolutely. And it's exciting. I mean, every day, we can just kind of look at the privilege that we've kind of been given. And I'm not sure that I'd have the same trajectory if I didn't have that point of view that you kind of described just now. Right. And so we talked a little bit about the HBCU experience, how you feel that, it shaped you. Yeah. I shared a little bit about mine. Can you talk to me about when you graduated from Clark? Yeah. I know you said that you felt that you weren't prepared, but you said that you feel like that was primarily because you didn't have your game plan together. That's all me. Yeah. So, because I'm used to, or at that point, and take it back to high school, right? I was just used to being the smartest kid in the room, the most charismatic, handsome guy. Things just came really, really easy. So I'm like, once college is over, I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to walk into Coca-Cola, and they're just going to be wowed by my charisma, and I'm just going to probably make $150,000 a year. That wasn't the reality at all, right? So, I needed to figure out a way to make things happen, and I ended up working in a mailroom my first job out of college at the American Arbitration Association in Atlanta. And my charisma and my intelligence kind of moved me forward, and I ended up, working in finance there for a little bit of time. But I was ill prepared because I was just kind of too cool for myself. Luckily, I've removed that, at this point in my life, or
I guess, for the past 10 years at a minimum. But Clark definitely prepared me to, or HBCUs in general prepare you to be polished. I remember in school having being told, to go back to my dorm room and get another tie because this wasn't appropriate, right? And then that allowed me to interview well and continue to make moves forward.
So, what's your grandfather's name?
Thomas, just like me.
Okay, so I see a little bit of Thomas in you because you said before that he had started at the bottom in the community, and then he worked his way up. So
Definitely.
I'm seeing the parallels of his work that he instilled in you. In terms of getting out of your own way and moving forward, removing your ego, can you give us, let's say, the top 3 things that you felt like you needed to do in order to remove your ego so that you can actually move forward and not depend on your laurels and your good looks and all of these things?
No, definitely. I think the number one thing is, and thank you for the compliment, but I think the number one thing is really understanding where I want to be and understanding that nothing in between should stand in that way, right? So I think that's the number one thing that allowed me to get over myself. Setting that goal. The other thing is I'm just super competitive, right? So once you pass me, I have to figure out a way to catch up.
Okay.
So being competitive and keeping that competitive spirit, that competitive nature, very important for me to kind of get out of my own way. And then I guess for 3, I'm not sure how you even prepared to really answer that question, but just being natural and responding to it.
So would you say authenticity?
Yeah.
Still being Thomas?
Yeah, just maintaining me. I mean, I think that the most important thing for me to do as a black professional, cool guy is to let someone else know that you can be cool and black and succeed, and not, you don't have to be someone you're not. And I think that's been at the forefront of the way I've approached just life in general. Right? It's important for me to, when I go speak at the school, right, at my high school, it's important that my jeans are ripped. It just is, right? I want you to be able to speak to me on your level. I'm not going to be as cool as you because you're 15, but I want you to be able to approach me, and I think that's very important. I think people will respond to that. I think that's the charisma we're talking about, that I thought would take me all the way. I think it's still a piece that you need in order to
navigate different environments.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I love that. So speaking of that, navigating different environments, you're intentional, right? And sometimes situations may come to you. Can you talk about the experience that you had with Angela Benson and LinkedIn and all of that? Can you give us that story?
Yeah, I mean, this is like one of them. It's actually probably one of the highlights of my career from a personal place. So I remember, and Angela listens to this, she'll probably laugh. I remember, wow, I'm at Living Social at the time. I'm being flown down into D.C., and I'm going through the training at Living Social, and I see this woman, this black woman on CNN that is speaking my language, right? Her level of charisma identify with me, right?
Okay.
And I'm like, man, what I would do to work with her, how do I get in front of this person, right? And maybe 2 years later, I get a message on LinkedIn and says, I'd like to chat. So we talk, and she says, yeah, I see you have some startup experience because I worked with a couple kind of tech startups by that time. And I'm excited, and we talk, and 2 weeks later, I have a full-time job with NewME Accelerator, and I'm working with these amazing entrepreneurs. And when I say amazing, I'm not saying that this entrepreneur was, ready to create the new Facebook. This was someone that was in Gulfport, Mississippi, that doesn't have access to technology as a, not like I have here in New York, where I can just go to an accelerator or some sort of technology school and learn these things. I mean, this person's in Mississippi, this person's in Ghana, this person's in anywhere across the world where there is a divide, right? So we know we have Silicon Valley, Silicon Alley, but this is before we had Silicon Bayou, and I had the opportunity to work with these entrepreneurs and help them with the things that they needed help with, things that I took for granted that I knew from my kind of working with startups, and also that I knew from kind of growing up in tech. That was one of the best opportunities that I've had. I'm still excited by it. I'm still excited when I see some of the entrepreneurs that I had a little bit of opportunity to help with their products and services. still succeeding to this day. So, no, that was one of my happiest moments.
So in that, right? So you said 2 years later, you saw her on CNN, you went down to DC, you're working at a particular company.
Yeah.
And you go, then 2 years later, you get the opportunity. In that time frame, what are some of the things, because this is super important, because earlier you talked about the fact that, you had to get out of your own way. And in that, there's a sense of entitlement. And oftentimes the entitlement hurts us. What are some of the things that you had to do specifically in order to push yourself forward? Because a lot of times it's the work that you're not asked to do that puts you and sets you up for an experience like when Angela Benton calls you that you're ready.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I'll tell you exactly.
Or some kind of courses that you might, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's actually perfect, right? So while I was at my first tech startup, so the first tech startup I worked with was acquired by Guild Group. I was there as the first or second, depending on who walked in the office the first
What was the
day.
company?
Buy With Me, Inc. So I walked in there, first person on the business development team that they hired. If you probably don't, most people probably don't know what that's like, but in a tech startup, you get a couple $1 million, and you need to take that couple $1 million and grow really, really big, really, really fast. Right. So we grew from me to 100 people in less than a year. Understanding how difficult that is, how many sleepless nights there are, really, really tough. While I was doing that, I had the thought process that I need to learn further than what I'm learning here at this startup. So what I would do is I'd work with small businesses with the intention of learning, not with the intention of making money. I made money, obviously, because that's just kind of the guy that I am. But I had the intention of, hey, what do I not know how to do, and how can I learn it? And the best way to learn it is by applying it. So I had that opportunity during that time. As far as kind of conversing with, so as time goes on, I'm doing this, I'm running my business, I'm still working full time. I decided that I'm going to step away, and I joined this career accelerator called the Startup Institute, right? So spent my own money, went to SINY, and I learned technical marketing while I wasn't working. Luckily, I still had my business running, so I was able to use that money to afford to go to the program and also stay afloat and not live like a college student while I'm in this program for 12 weeks. So I had the definite intention to learn while I was working, take some more time to get a formal education what I was doing, and then I'll even almost call it by happenstance. I have this person that I've been wanting to work with all this time reach out to me because I set myself up with the knowledge, set myself up on socials, set myself up with kind of just all of this education, and it was just the right place at the right time. I can even tell you that I probably wouldn't be prepared if I didn't take those steps.
I like that. So you stopped working, took the course, and then this opportunity kind of just came through. Yeah,
I mean, at that time, the course is to tell you to get a job.
Right.
You know, and I'm telling everyone there, like, I kind of like my business the way it is right now. I'm making money, but I do need this education so I can further help my clients, right? So I didn't have an intention of working with anyone.
And when you're saying your business, you quit your main job, started your own company, and then took the course at the same time, and then start working for the...
Yeah, so I've been freelancing. I started freelancing with my first startup. And while I was freelancing, I moved forward, and then I stopped freelancing and started working full time as influence media. And during that time, I was able to go ahead and start working at Startup Institute, or start taking those courses because I had already created enough of a business that I can move forward. Okay.
Cool. Well, man, thank you so much for breaking that down. When we come back, dude, we are going to seriously have some chats about your business, what you've done with Influence Media, and some of the other companies that you work with. So
cool. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Beautiful people, you have the opportunity to call in and chat with Thomas, even if you're here in the States, if you're on the East Coast, West Coast, down south, up north with us, or if you're all the way out there in Paris, still, please give us a shout. Call in 212-650-6903. The country code is +1. Here's Redemption. This is from the Black Panther soundtrack. Shouts out to Killmonger. Beautiful people, this is the Create Your Life series. I'm your host, Kevin Y. Brown, and we are back. We actually have a caller on the line. Caller, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Please, let us know, your name, where you're calling from, and, how you enjoying the show so far.
I like Thomas Teel. I'm calling in from Paris. I'm going to say I do appreciate you guys both sharing your experiences. Thomas in particular, my grandparents had a big part in my life, and they both were educators, so it was nice to see you share that story. No. And just thinking about accessibility and the things that were provided to you and how you've used that to keep movement and building is amazing. So
I really appreciate that.
Something that I've been thinking about and I've been noticing in Paris or honestly in my travels is when I run into somebody that's from Africa and they ask me where I'm from, I say, I'm from California, and that feels weird. Do you guys have that same experience?
Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's definitely interesting, but there's like this sense of like community and like peace. You know, when you have that conversation and you meet people from other places, like it's like a instant understanding that we're both from the diaspora and it's all good. Have you been experiencing that? I said, have you been experiencing that in Paris?
I have. I was just at Versailles, and the guy's like, "You look like you're from Senegal," and I'm like, "Possibly."
Right.
That would be nice to know, but
Wow.
I can really tell you it's California, but it kind of dawned on me in Rome, when I had some people asking me, "Hey, where are you from?" And I'm like, "California," and I'm like, that doesn't even sound right,
Yeah.
Sounds like African ancestry is gonna be coming to your home real soon. You're gonna have to take the test.
Right. I don't know if I trust it. Who's doing it? But now you guys are having a great little episode there, so I appreciate watching it.
No, definitely appreciate you.
Even from here.
Definitely appreciate you taking the time out. You had to match the times up and everything, get your time zones right. So appreciate you for that.
Right.
Definitely appreciate you for that. All right. Well, is there anybody that you want to shout out while you live on the air?
Nah, not at all. Just you guys keep doing what you're doing.
Okay, will do. Thank you so much for calling in.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good one. All right. So, beautiful people, as you hear, man, Thomas, how do you feel, bro? That's our first caller from Paris. You know what I mean? To, really call and touch down.
That's cool. I feel like I'm on the yard right now.
But you famous. You're famous now, international. So one of the things that you said before we left and went to the break is that, you're running your own company.
Yeah.
Influence Media. What is the goal of Influence Media? What exactly is it that you that you all do?
So I still loosely run Influence. The goal, like I said earlier, was to learn, right? The goal wasn't necessarily to create this large, profitable business, right? If that happened because I made all the right decisions, it did happen. But the goal was to align me or prepare me for the next steps in my career. It just happened to be a pretty long time that I was running the company because I needed to learn a lot. But that was really the goal.
And I'm happy that you touched on that. So there's a couple things that come to mind, right? You've been quoted saying that, if someone wants to be in tech, then you have to have something on your own, meaning like a business or something like that, because you need a proven track record.
Yeah. So some of the best advice that I ever got, and actually back to my grandfather again, right? He's definitely like the person that's given me most of my direction. He gave me this advice that I need to have, but I don't know the right term to use in like not tech words, but I'll say what you say in tech. To have like a CEO stack, right? So to understand all the different parts of a business so that you can converse the way that a CEO would. Most of your CEOs in tech have some business development experience, they have some technical experience, some product experience, some creative experience, all these little things they have touched on so that they can have the conversation with all these different functions within the business. So working on my own allowed me to have to learn how to do all those different things. So when you're looking to work in tech, you need that credibility and saying that you started something on your own. A, to really fit within the culture because everyone else has done that. But B, so that you can have a proper conversation about something that you don't even necessarily know how to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I guess it makes me think about the fact that, you worked in tech before, then you went out on your own. Then now you're back into the corporate world now working.
And I'll be excited too, right? So I never want to paint this like picture of, like failure, right? So I feel like this was, like you said earlier, very intentional. But more than that, I'm doing something I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important part.
Okay. Makes sense. So now you're in the ad tech space. What do you feel like the difference between ad tech and regular advertising is? Can you shed some light for us on that?
Yeah, so we're all moving into the technical parts of advertising, right? So, what it used to be is we used to work with advertising where it was a catch-all kind of method, right? A method of say, hey, you know, I want to present this message and everyone's going to get the same message, right? TV, right? So the BMW commercial shows up to you and people are not necessarily like a BMW buyer. In ad tech nowadays, I can establish that you are a potential BMW driver and I will send you tons of BMW ads on your phone, on your computer,
Targeting
on your TV. That's the difference between traditional and what we're learning now is more of a one-to-one conversation.
Okay. And so let's say for a small to medium-sized business that can't afford the rates of a company that you work for now, what are some of the things that they can do that we can do in order to maximize our exposure and our reach? Yeah,
it's really simple, and hopefully everyone's giving the same advice. Facebook. Facebook, because they have a platform that is very, I won't say simple because everyone has different like levels of understanding. But what I will say is they have kind of the most simple platform that you can use to highly target your audience and not spend a lot of money doing so.
Okay. Now what I want to do is I actually want to kind of switch modes and I want to jump into the dolphin tank.
Cool.
So my question to you is can you swim?
I swim with the sharks.
Oh, well, I guess, the dolphin tank is nothing for this guy. Okay. Question number 1. What are your goal setting methods and how do you measure them?
Yeah, so I measure it, and this is going to sound pompous, but I'll just be honest with you. I measure it by my bank account, by watching it and on a quarterly basis, weekly basis, and I make sure that I set those goals, right? I think it's very important from a legacy standpoint to acquire finances and assets. So that's the way I do it. I just checking that bank account and make sure that I'm hitting my goals.
Okay. What is the top tech that you're using to make sure that your life is going great and that you're using at your company to make things run smoothly for yourself?
The top piece of tech right now? Evernote.
Got you. Expound upon it.
Evernote is essentially your old composition notebook or journal you used to write in, but done digitally with tags and search methods. So I take a lot of notes, do a lot of learning, and the way I need to learn is I need to go back and review. So gotcha. I'll sit in a meeting with a client or within a meeting within the workplace and take several notes and come back home or sit on my commute and read over that stuff and try to become as close to an expert as I can.
Got you. Favorite quote or model that you live by?
Find a way to make one.
I love it.
Find a way to make one.
I love it. Okay. Favorite or most impactful book that you've read?
7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey.
When'd you read it? Why is that the favorite?
My favorite. So I wasn't much of a reader. And Stephen Covey came to Clark. And he did a speech at Clark or had a conversation at Clark. And his description of how to approach things was so simplistic that I learned to love it. My favorite part of the book was there's a space in between stimulus and response, and that space is the right to choose. And it allowed me to be a very even-keeled person, remove any frustrations that I have, because at the moment that I'm deciding, or the moment that, I use the word decide, right? The moment that I could fall off the handle, I understand it's a decision whether I need to or not. And that allowed me to really navigate in a different way.
Oh, man. I like that. I like that a lot. I want to give a shout out to LaVonda Larks.
Oh, Lovey.
Yeah. She's on there. She's saying, hey, friends. What's up, Lovey? Dana Lucille Bobbitt is saying hi. Tiana Gray, Janine Jones, Sheikah Jones, Danielle Denisha. I mean, we got people on here. They tuning in, man. They love you.
I love them.
They love you. Okay. Definitely this is one of the most important questions on the show. Cool. Nobody can escape the show without answering this question.
Okay. You shouldn't build it up that way because now I'm nervous.
Don't be nervous. You too smooth, mate. Remember, you the cool dude with the rips in the jeans.
I try my best.
It's all good. 3 jewels that you would tell someone looking to create their best life.
Definitely be yourself, your authentic self. I think that's important. Reflect. Look back. Things that you didn't realize happened, and you were too close to it to understand that it happened. really look back and learn from those things that you've already encountered. And this may be because because my wife's in the studio, and also because we just recently got married almost a year ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But find someone, right? Find someone that you can confide in, especially as an entrepreneur. Someone that you can get your thoughts out of your head, because you will go crazy. Kev, you know this. You won't sleep at night. You'll lose your mind thinking about the next way to close that next deal. Mm-hmm. So finding someone that can just listen, even if they don't understand, I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle.
Okay. So thank you for answering that. What's up next for you?
Man. So working on a documentary.
Okay.
Myself, Kareem Myers, working on a documentary. We haven't titled it yet because we're I won't say we're at the beginning stages, because we made some strides in interviews and we've gone pretty far, pretty deep, and it's pretty good. Basically, it came from a necessity in my life to have that mentor, have that big homie, I like to say. And we're creating this doc with the idea that there's another guy like me that needed someone to talk to when they needed to understand, how do I know this is the woman I want to marry? How do I know this is the job I want to take? How do I know that if I should still live in New York City, right? So we're talking about the way we navigated it within our careers, and hopefully we can be that big homie to someone else.
I love that.
Also, the Abstract Square podcast. So myself, Chad Bennett, Brian Frazier, Saeed McLean, we're create a podcast, and we're basically discussing things that happen in this urban professional life from the point of view of 30-somethings. And it's really, really interesting, really, really racy, really, really cool, laid back, and something you want to kind of listen to and have a drink with, and really relax.
Okay.
So you can find that on iTunes and every other place right now where podcasts are found. So I'm excited for anyone to take a listen to that. And hopefully, Kev, you can drop a link somewhere on your socials, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely drop a link. That's not a problem at all. Okay, so how do we keep in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm not too social. I try to.
Lies.
It's actually not too social when it comes to the internet, but it was with intention, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like the thought that I don't want to kind of oversaturate myself and kind of be the silly person. My posts are going to be posts that mean something. Yeah. So Teel, TWTEEL, across all socials, and that's where folks can find me.
That's amazing when you get to have your own name. I love it.
I mean, that's what happens when you're an early adopter.
I like it. Okay, so now we have officially entered the turnaround.
Okay.
And what the turnaround is that you have the opportunity to ask me any questions that you want to. So the floor is yours. Create Your Life family. You know how this goes. This means that Thomas is in charge. We haven't scripted these questions, so whatever comes out of his mouth is I have to answer. So let's see what he gives us.
Are you sure you want to do this?
I don't really, because I know you, but at the same time, you know what I mean? I got to give, you know what I mean? Got to be consistent for the family. So,
that's a perfect lead in. So my first question is, how many questions do I get a chance to ask?
You got time, brother.
All right. Cool. So my first question is, so I believe you're now celebrating your second year anniversary?
Yeah. We just hit 2 years. Yep.
What do you attribute your consistency to?
Man, I contribute it to a few things, actually. Number one, put my butt on the line and put the goal out there publicly. I would say that's huge.
Love that.
I contributed a lot of, you know what I mean, my drive to my upbringing and never wanting to be back in that place.
Right.
So those are two things that definitely drive me. But also just the funny idea that I feel like you can literally create the life that you want if you're willing to put the work in. So just literally being like, oh, you know what? Before we got in the studio, whatever, I'm like, yo, the show's going to be on Sirius XM in 2 years. Like, I don't care.
Right.
And then going after it because you know that, you know what I mean? This stuff just starts aligning, man. And the consistency is what gets you the catalog, which then gets you to be able to have those conversations and be prepared for it, right? Because, like, let's say, 4 years ago or something like that, I wouldn't have been ready to be consistent in the studio and be here, you know what I mean, when it's raining, when it's snowing, when it's, holidays and things like that, so that's been huge.
That's cool. I love that. So I'm familiar with one of your big homies.
Okay.
And, I mean, how do you feel about mentorship and how that's kind of placed you with some of this mindset?
Which big homie are you talking?
Moffitt,
yeah. I mean, I could talk about him for an extended period of time, but I could talk about just mentorship, period. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for mentors. And I think that you have the opportunity to learn from anybody. And the reason why I say that is because I remember being young and, you know, my neighborhood, like yours, was heavily drug infested. And, you know, there's a lot of not positive things going on around there. But I remember, I can't remember exactly what he said, but I remember a drug addict saying something to me and my friends. We were walking and just hanging around, just being silly. And he said something to us about sickness. And he was talking about basically defeating sickness and basically making sure that your body's a temple. And so with that, what I understood is that, you know what I mean, you can't judge a person for where they are right now in this moment, right? Because they could have been somebody like huge or, you know, important and have this wealth of knowledge prior to where they are now. And so for there, we call it game back home. And so it's like you can get game from anybody, right? And the thing about life is if life is a game, you know, you definitely don't want to take shortcuts in terms of not doing the work, but you definitely want to be able to learn from others' experiences and get the game from them so that then you can, you know, maybe do some hopping. Right. Not take the shortcuts, but do some hopping around and be able to dodge some obstacles. And so from that, then, you know what I mean, I was very lucky to have, I would say, mentors from the other side of the tracks who really showed me what life could be like. Like my principal, Mr. Tony Gross, I used to like his daughter, and I used to hang out.
Sounds like you, Kev.
Yeah, but I used to hang out with her and her friends. So I mean, it was, you know, strictly platonic. We're kids, but I used to go to their house, right? On like Wednesdays we get out of school, and so it was me, her, and our other two friends, and we would hang out and just sit there and just like chill and just talk and stuff like that. But when I'm over there, they have a study. I've never seen a study, a library. Their house is peaceful. It's not a lot going on, you know what I mean, up and down the street. And there's food in the refrigerator. She doesn't have to ask permission to go into the refrigerator. There's all these different things. And so it's like exposure, like, oh man, this is what life could be like. You know what I mean? And so then I'm learning. And so, you know, he knew it, but you know what I mean? I'm going up to him and I'm asking him different questions about life. And so my curiosity is being sparked. So mentorship, when I got to college, Moffitt, you know what I mean? He changed the trajectory. I was like a little Moff. Like Cass was teasing me like at one point. I was like still in his swag, but it was like, yo, I needed to, you know what I mean? Try to figure it out. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yo, where I'm from, as a matter of fact, he's the person that told me, oh, you need to be as fly in your dress clothes as you are when you're in those Jordans and Air Maxes. Because if it wasn't for him, I was like, look, man, you know, you just put on the size, you know.
I thought he was going to say he needs to be as fly as Thomas and Ja.
That's real. I'm not gonna hold you, bro. Like you definitely, you've always been fly. Like I'm not gonna hold you. You know, not to even boost your ego, but you definitely always been fly. And your whole clique, you know, Andy, Gene, Kareem, like y'all, you know what I'm saying? Like y'all do your thing, and so it's like y'all have these memorable personalities that I feel like even now, you know, us as men, you know, all being friends and stuff like that, it's all love when we see each other, but definitely being able to have that influence on others who come from similar backgrounds. And who are looking for similar things in life, right? And I think that education really helps to build that bridge and to help you, because, like you said, you know, you come from a different family structure, right? But at the same time, because we have this common experience in education and in being black men, you know, we can have this dialogue, and it's not like, oh, you know what, I'm tougher than you, or this, that, or the other. It's like, yo, man, it's peace.
It's about progression.
Yeah, absolutely. But just coming to that level of understanding, I think that mentorship for me is definitely played that. Even, you know, sitting down and having a proper family meal, like for me, where the dad is at the table and, you know, you sitting across from somebody and stuff like that, that came from a mentor of mine. I had never had that at home. You know what I mean? In
my house, we don't have any children, but I have to sit at the head of the table because that's the way I was raised, with someone at the head of the table, and it's protocol. And why should I change these things that were successful to a certain extent, right? So I think that's really important to understand how important that is.
See, now I'm like itching because I want to ask you a question. You know, you newly married and stuff like that, but you know, you got the floor, man. So I'll let you go.
Man, I was so into your response, I didn't really think of. So one of my big things is I'm big on listening. Yeah, so I was totally listening to you and didn't think of a question. Man, I'm actually interested in. I mean, you've been here for a while now, right? But what kept you here in New York City?
I'm gonna be honest with you, man. New York City kicked my butt when I got here.
I know.
You know, it was different. Like I lived in London, so I thought, I was ready. Nah, this is a different beast. So I actually, for a period of time, I thought that it had the best of me, and I couldn't go out like that. But I think also the energy, and New York is really one of those places, in my opinion, where if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah.
But to be able to say that you made it here is an accomplishment, and I think that you have to stick with it. And when it's time, you'll know that it's time, because New York is one of those places where it's like, oh, you know what? If you say you'll do 1 year, you'll do 3. If you say you do 3, you'll do 5. 5 turns into 7. July 3rd will be 10 years for me.
Wow.
And I'm
You're
like,
a New Yorker. I know you don't want to admit it, but
I know I don't want to admit it. And I was actually having this debate with a friend where they were like, more about and how to navigate and get around New York than you probably do, the Bay Area, because it's changed so much. And I was like, wow, I had never thought about that. And they were saying it like trying to get at me because, I'm like big, like, I'm from Vallejo, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know my city, it ain't changed that much, but what they were saying about being able to navigate the different cities and things like that was actually true, because I've been gone since I was 18. And so that was interesting, because I would equate, every borough to a different city, right?
Right.
Which, of course, it is. And so that's the same thing like in the Bay, being able to navigate from San Francisco to Oakland to Richmond,
totally
Hayward, stuff like that. Totally different places. But I know how to get to wherever I'm going in Queens. I know how to get to wherever I'm going in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? I'm familiar with the train stops and stuff. And so, I would say that. And then also, what I also realized is that I feel like I grew up on the East Coast. Right? You know what I mean? Why? Because I went to school in Atlanta.
Gotcha.
Right? And then from Atlanta, then I came up here. I've been out here for the last 10 years. So let's say I did decide to move to California. My network and the nucleus of people that I've known and that I've built these like really like in-person relationships with are here. Versus like when I go home, I know a couple people, but the majority of people that I know aren't doing what I'm doing because we left off in high school. And so the ones who would be doing something similar, they don't live there anymore.
Well, I actually have that same experience, and I'm from New York, where I won't. My network that I developed is very different than those that I kind of grew up with. So I won't necessarily, while I'm never going to not go back to the neighborhood, I professionally, it's just not. It's probably what you would experience in Vallejo just as well. Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty of it, man, is being able to have these, I always go back to the conversations. You can have these conversations with people. I probably, had it not been for Clark and been for education, I probably would have never had the luxury to sit across from you.
It's not luxury, man.
I'll consider it a luxury, bro. I'll consider you to be I think you're a good guy, you know what I mean? And to be around good guys who, have your best interest, I feel like that's a luxury. It's definitely a necessity, but it's a luxury to have, something to be cherished.
It's also my duty, right? To be a gentleman and to be a stand-up guy for another black man and make sure that we all have the best we can have for each other.
Hey, and that's your grandfather speaking, right? Thomas the Thomas.
Yeah, I think so.
See? It just, man, iron just sharpens iron, bro.
Definitely.
And if you're not sharpening, you're rusting. That's a quote from Eric Fondren, who's a regular guest contributor on the CEO Talk segment here on the station. So, yeah, I do have a question for you. Being that you're newly married, something that you talked about, which I thought was really important before we got on air, was your decision to go back into the corporate market. Can you tell us a little bit about why you decided to do that and what somebody you feel like, what's necessary and needs to be in place in order to be able to sustain a marriage or,
Yeah, and I'll even get a little personal, right? So in my household, when finances weren't right, my mom was frustrated. Mm-hmm. She was not happy. And, to see my girlfriend at the time go through any frustrations like that wasn't something I was prepared to do, right? So these are the most important women in my life, mom, girlfriend at the time. I'm not prepared to see you frustrated over finances. That's probably the thing that would hurt my feelings the most would be to see her hurt over money. So, from taking all that time and being selfish with my career and learning with my own business, I definitely went out there and said, hey, Takia said, let's have a destination wedding so we can save some money. I said, no, let's do exactly what you want. I'll figure it out, right? So I ran my business, worked a full-time job, and got back into the workplace and had a very kind of a lot more stable situation than when I was just kind of working for myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important that when you're making that next step and you're bringing someone along with you, that you need to be financially stable. And I think that's a very important piece when you're making that next step.
All right. I'm about to put you on the spot because your wife is here in the studio.
Let's go for it.
What's like, 3 things that made you feel like, you know what, Takia is the one?
I'll flip that on his head.
She's smiling.
Well, I'll flip that on his head. And this is advice that I would give someone. When you're looking for that person to spend the rest of your life with, I don't think you'd look for someone that is necessarily the one. I think you look for the person that you just can't live without. And I think they're one and the same kind of thing. But like, how would my life be? And I mean this, right? Not because she's here, but how would my life be if she did not exist in my life? Was what I needed to internalize before I said, "Hey, let's do this." Mm-hmm. So that's number 1. The rest of the stuff is simple, right? We're talking about like be with or be without. I'd rather be with, right? Mm-hmm. But the rest of the stuff is pretty, can she cook? Because that's pretty important to me. And does she have patience? Because as you know, and I know, being in this, up and down kind of hustle, we'll call it, you need somebody to have some patience because there are some trials and tribulations of being a black man. Got you.
I love it, man. Dude, thank you so much. She's over here. She's smiling. She
I rarely
approves,
see that, so that's good.
Yeah, she approves that answer. And she's not saying nothing. She's like, I'm going to be nice to you because you're on air right now.
It's almost dinner time, too, so.
True. Beautiful people, if you enjoyed this episode of the Create Your Life series, be sure to download it from our podcast, which is available on createyourlifeseries.com, iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Music. Also, be sure to leave a review of the podcast. You can catch us live on Sundays from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via 90.3 FM in New York or on Facebook Live at facebook.com/KevBrown1. We encourage you to participate in the conversation on Facebook or call in at 212-650-6903. Follow us on Instagram at CYLS Series and at Kevin Y. Brown. Be blessed, and we'll see you back here live next week.
Create your life.
Crée ta propre vie.
Create your life.
创造你的生活。
Create your life.
Crea la tua vita.
Create your life.
Und skip your liver.
You better create your life.
Create your life.
Great love you.
Create your life.
Create your life.